the prevalence of religious diversity in the world should give pause to anyone who really believes in their own religion as if it is the right religion. How do we begin to think about diversity of religions in the context of a conviction in our own?
Well, I think that is an increasingly prevalent question, an increasingly relevant and prevalent question. People have made two kinds of objections to belief in a specific religion, say Christianity or Judaism, when there are these other religions also being practiced and out there, so to speak. One of them is a, broadly speaking, moral objection, that there's something immoral, there's something egotistical or self-serving or arrogant or something like that in believing a certain proposition when you know that a lot of other people don't believe that. It just isn't the right thing to do. You can't properly say, I'm right and you're wrong. It's like you're thinking you're better than this other person. Well, I don't see that there is anything morally wrong with believing. In the first place, you might not be able to stop believing. You might just, belief isn't really under your voluntary control. I find myself accepting Christian belief. It's not like I can just say, okay, I'm going to stop that. I can't do that. That's not within my power. But secondly, and I would say in this context more important, is the fact that that very claim itself is another one of those self-referentially incoherent claims that shoots itself in the foot. Because the person puts this forward, he says it's egotistical or something, immoral in some way to believe when you know other people don't believe that way. But that very proposition is one that not very many people believe. I mean, he believes it, but not other people. So he himself is doing just exactly what he himself is condemning. So it's not a sensible position to be in, I would say. And I can't see anything egotistical in believing what seems to me to be right. I mean, if you don't believe it, well, I guess I got to say to myself, I don't know why you don't, but you've made a mistake. I mean, people make mistakes. I make mistakes too. I mean, I don't see much to that suggestion.
The second argument.
The second suggestion is that if you know there are other people who don't believe the way you do on this topic, and you'd think also that you can't convince them, you can't think of some arguments that would actually convince them so that they would now believe the same way you do, then there's something immoral, not immoral, there's something irrational in your continuing to believe the same way. You're not living up to some standards of rationality. But I really wonder about that. Consider other areas of life, say politics, or for that matter, philosophy. I mean, philosophers disagree with each other all the time. There was a great philosopher, David Lewis, died not so long ago. I had enormous respect for him, but disagreed with him on a wide variety of points. Well, was there something irrational about that? I agree, he's certainly as good a philosopher as I, a better philosopher, and he thought this, he thought P, I thought not P. I don't see that makes me irrational. I think about the thing again, consider all the arguments, consider objections and the like, and it still seems to me that, let's say, people are not material objects. How can it be irrational for me to think that? I don't see where the charge is supposed to come from. I mean, what lies behind that charge in that case?
If we look at the world, our belief system in terms of religion is very highly correlated to where we were born and to the social milieu in which we grew up. Western religions are largely Christian, Eastern religions may be Buddhist, India is obviously Hinduism, the vast majority, the Muslim world, we know. So how can we, with religion, we're trying to approach reality. It's not a philosophical argument, it's not a political argument, but religion is supposed to be something that's in touch with the fundamental reality of the universe. Doesn't this make it different?
Well, I don't know. Philosophy is supposed to be in touch with reality, too. I mean, the point is to come up with true philosophical beliefs, not just ones that are amusing or clever. Or maybe some philosophers only want to come up with what's amusing or clever, but the rest of us don't. We want to come up with what's true. It's the same sort of thing. Same thing in politics there, too. I mean, I I really want to come up with what are the right answers to the political questions. And lots of people disagree with me. What am I supposed to do about that, though? Am I supposed to stop thinking what I think is the right answer is in fact right?
So you have to stop. But let's put it all together. Philosophy, politics, religion, they all have a very high cultural correlation or environmental correlation. Doesn't that put all of them into a very relativistic pattern? And we don't believe that politics are God-given, so to speak, and that have some fundamental relationship to reality. It's sort of muddled through in politics, but religion's supposed to be different.
Well, I don't think it's supposed to be. I don't see the difference. In each case, you're trying to find out what's true about something very important. Politics is about how to live or how to live at a communal level. Philosophy is an attempt to learn the answer to the wide variety of questions philosophers have asked and answered. Religion is basically an attempt, again, to come to grips with what's most real, with what's most basic in reality. And it's true, and it can be worrying that in each of these cases there is what you called something like cultural involvement. A lot depends on where you're born and what your cultural milieu is. But that's true all across the board for everything, not just for that. The same thing goes for science. If I'd been born, let's say, in 5th century Athens, I would have a wholly different idea of what the world is like from if I'm born as when I was.
Science may be a good thing to bring up, because in today's world that's not the case. Maybe if you compare temporally over time, science is different, but in today's world in general, there is uniformity among all different cultures in what a mathematical proof is and what the standard model of physics are and the different problems. So there's a uniformity, whereas in these other areas there isn't.
Well, but there isn't uniformity over time.
Right.
What I believe on these scientific matters depends in part on when and where I was born. And in that regard, it's like these other things. Now, we might say in the case of science, we really know. Some people will say, oh, here we really, this is really hard evidence we've got, so we really are knowing these things. But I'm kind of doubtful about that, too. I mean, if you look at the history of science, almost all the important theories that were put forward at one time were later on rejected. And sometimes the rejections are of really powerful and deep character. Say the change from Newtonian mechanics to quantum mechanics. It's not just like it's a precisification of quantum mechanics. It takes a very, very different stance towards physical reality. So, I mean, how likely is it that 500 years from now, what we think in science will be thought then? I don't know. I'd be a little pessimistic about that.
Dealing with politics, we're as a human beings trying to muddle through how we all fit together in a society. There's no attempt at all to say that this is somehow founded in some ultimate reality of the fundamental nature of the universe. But religion does make that claim. That makes a difference.
Well, maybe. I'm not so sure. In the case of politics, one thing that is fundamental and important is what we think about human nature, what sorts of beings human beings are, and what is good for them, what makes them flourish, or what flourishing for them is. Those are very deep and important questions about reality, a reality which to us is extremely important, namely ourselves. And religion is, it seems to me, in that very same neighborhood. So what should I do? I see that there are other religions, but again, I think about my own, I reflect on my own religion. It seems to me right. I can't do anything other than go with it. What else can I do? I can't say, well, since these other people don't think that, I've got to stop thinking it. That seems to me not to be a sensible response.
But do you take the step and say, therefore, they are wrong? Many people in today's world look for similarities, complementarities among different religions and make the metaphor that it's like, a blind man looking at an elephant, and then one feels the tail, and one feels the trunk, and one feels the leg, and everybody's a different view, but they're really saying the same thing. Do you believe that all religions are looking at the same entity and seeing different elements of it?
I think there is some truth to that. I mean, you're really asking me two questions. First, do I think that beliefs that conflict with mine are wrong, mistaken? Well, of course I do. I mean, it can't be that they're both right if they're in conflict. You know, if you say George is wearing a red shirt and I say George is wearing a green shirt, we can't both be right. And I've got to think you're wrong. On the second one, could it be that all religions are sort of like groping after the same reality? There, I think there is more likelihood, so to speak. I mean, if you take the most prevalent religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, there is a certain respect in which they're very similar. In all of these religions, there is something like God. There's either God or something like God. In the three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, it's just God. I mean, God is who's omnipotent, omniscient, holy, good, created the world, deserves our worship and obedience, and so on. These religions are really, at that level, quite similar. In Hinduism, there isn't any person exactly like God, or rather, Hinduists are henotheists rather than monotheists. There is a being who's much like God, but then lots of other sort of lesser deities. But again, there's a being who's very much like God. And most of the world's population believes in something, the vast majority, in fact, in a being very much like God. So one way to think about it, I suppose, is that these different religions all are thinking about God. They're all in contact with the same being, but they differ with respect to some of God's properties or some of the things God has done. For example, Christians think that the second person of the Trinity became incarnate and became a human being and the like of that. It makes more sense to make the kind of suggestion you're making. There's one fundamental reality that there are these different approaches to. But I guess I would add to that these approaches can't all be right. Where they're inconsistent, then some of them are wrong. And I guess as a Christian, I'd have to say beliefs that are in conflict with Christian belief are mistaken.